The war zone had its rhythms, its endless repetition of fear, exhaustion, and silence between storms. In the outpost where dust clung to every boot and the horizon never promised safety, there was always one figure people barely noticed. She was the girl in the med tent, quiet, precise, steady. To most of the soldiers, she was simply Doc or the med tent girl. She didn't brag about her skills, didn't share stories around the fire. She was often seen arranging supplies, disinfecting instruments, checking the expiration dates on vials, and writing notes no one else cared to read. She moved like a shadow, useful but unremarkable, someone assumed to be there only for the aftermath, to clean, to patch, to wait. Nobody asked much about her background. Nobody wondered why her eyes seemed older than her face, or why she always positioned herself near the edges of the tent where she could hear everything outside. War made people self-centered, survival left little room for curiosity. But what none of them knew was that the quiet young woman who blended into the background carried more battlefield scars, both visible and invisible, than most of them combined. She was not just a nurse. She was a fully trained combat medic who had seen more chaos than she could put into words. And one day, when everything went wrong, the truth came crashing out. The ambush. It happened on a day that had started deceptively calm. The patrol had gone out in the early hours, the sun rising over the ridges like a burning coin in the sky. By noon, the heat pressed against their helmets, making every step heavier. Inside the outpost, some soldiers cleaned their rifles, others played cards or wrote letters home. The med tent girl was restocking 4 bags, humming softly under her breath, unnoticed as always. Then the first explosion tore through the stillness. An RPG slammed into the outer wall, showering debris and dirt. Automatic gunfire followed, ripping into the compound from multiple sides. Alarms screamed. Soldiers scrambled for cover, shouting over each other in panic. Within seconds, the once calm outpost had become a storm of noise, smoke, and terror. The platoon leader rushed toward the barricade to rally his men, and then he fell. A bullet had found him, dropping him hard into the dust. The sight sent ripples of panic through the unit. Their leader was down. Orders were half shouted, half lost in the chaos. Men hesitated, frozen between running for cover and returning fire. Confusion spread like wildfire, and in that dangerous pause, the enemy pressed harder. It was in that moment of unraveling that the med tent girl stepped forward. Transformation. No one saw her arrive at first. She seemed to appear out of the smoke, her medical bag slung across her shoulder. She dropped to her knees beside the fallen officer, her hands moving with practiced speed. But then something unexpected happened. She didn't just tend to the wound. She took command. "Cover the east wall," she shouted, her voice clear and sharp. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. I need hands here now, tourniquet." The soldiers froze for a second, stunned by the force in her tone. This wasn't the quiet girl who fetched bandages and kept her head down. This was someone entirely different, someone who belonged in the heart of the fire. The hesitation broke. Men scrambled to obey, instinctively trusting the authority in her voice. She directed one soldier to apply pressure to the wound, barked at another to get her a field dressing, and all the while kept her eyes on both the patient and the battlefield. Bullets snapped against the walls. Dust clouded the air. But she didn't flinch. "She's not just patching him up," one of the soldiers muttered under his breath, almost in awe. She's leading us." And she was. The medic who fought like a soldier. Every move she made was decisive. She tied the tourniquet with steady hands, checked the officer's breathing, and then pointed to the gunners. "Shift your fire to the ridge. They're trying to flank you, move now." It was as though she could see the battle unfolding from above. Her instincts were razor-sharp, her commands precise. Where others saw chaos, she saw a map, one she had walked too many times before. The unit, shaken only moments before, began to fall into rhythm under her direction. Confidence spread. Fear ebbed. They fought back harder, covering each other, taking positions that made sense. And all the while, she kept working, one hand on her rifle, the other on her medical kit, the duality of her training revealed in full. She was no longer just the med tent girl. She was a combat medic, the backbone of survival. When reinforcements finally arrived, the ambush had already begun to crumble. The enemy pulled back, leaving behind silence and the acrid sting of smoke. The soldiers looked around at each other, stunned by what had just happened. They were alive. Their leader was alive. And it was because the quiet girl had stepped into the fire without hesitation. The truth revealed. It wasn't until later, when the chaos settled and the wounded were stabilized, that the truth came out. She wasn't some inexperienced assistant shipped in to organize supplies. She had years of fieldwork behind her, missions where she had dragged bleeding men out of firefights, stitched wounds in the dark, and given orders when every other voice had gone silent. She had trained with special units, learned to fight and heal in equal measure. She just never spoke of it. When asked why she never told anyone, she gave a small shrug. "Wasn't about me," she said simply. "It was about the work. And if you do the work right, no one should notice you until they have to." But now, everyone noticed. From that day forward, respect followed her everywhere she went. The same soldiers who once walked past her without a glance now straightened when she passed. They spoke her name with quiet reverence, knowing they owed her not just their leader's life, but their own survival. More than a medic. What struck the soldiers most wasn't just her skill. It was her composure. When others panicked, she remained calm. When others froze, she moved. Her strength wasn't loud, but it was unshakable. One of the younger soldiers, barely out of training, admitted later, "I thought heroes looked like the guys charging into battle. Turns out, sometimes they look like the person you least expect, the one who's been beside you all along." In war, courage takes many forms. For some, it's pulling a trigger. For others, it's holding a bleeding artery with bare hands while bullets fly overhead. For her, it was both. She embodied the truth that combat medics live by: you are a soldier first, but your mission is life. The legacy of the med tent girl. Stories like hers rarely make the headlines. Medics are often the unsung heroes, working quietly in the margins, patching up the broken, sending them back into the fight. They don't seek glory, they seek survival, for others if not for themselves. But in that dusty outpost, on the day everything almost fell apart, the med tent girl became more than an unseen presence. She became the reason an entire unit remembered what it meant to fight together. And while she never asked for recognition, her story spread among the men like wildfire. They told it around campfires, wrote it in letters home, carried it with them long after the war. Because some moments carve themselves into memory, and some people etch themselves into your life without meaning to. She was no longer just the med tent girl. She was the combat medic who saved them all, the leader who emerged when leadership was gone, the quiet shadow who proved stronger than anyone had guessed. Final reflection. In war, you learn quickly that appearances deceive. The loudest voices are not always the strongest. The ones who seem ordinary may hold extraordinary strength. And sometimes, the person you overlook is the one who will carry you through your darkest hour. Nobody knew the med tent girl was a combat medic, until she took the lead. And when she did, she changed everything.